Hi everyone, this is Yehuda Holtzman, and I'm glad to host today again Moshe Lipsker.
Hi.
This is a second session for the podcast discussing the shift from on-premise installation to multi-tenant cloud-based installation, and in parallel, the transition from a monolithic product to microservice-based product. At the first session, we discussed three main topics. The first was the reasoning for shifting from on-premise to cloud-based installation or cloud-based platform, SaaS platform. The second topic we discussed in the previous podcast was what are the implications in terms of technology and design mechanism. We raised a couple of challenges and how they were resolved with the new platform. And the third one was discussing the requirement, the agility requirement from the R&D QA team, what it means on a personal level for the developer, and how we resolve it. We mentioned that there is a fourth aspect, which is the organization change to support such a change. So, Moshe, I'm going to hand it to you now. Provide explanation on the major org change you have led, and if you can describe it, the process, and eventually the outcome.
First of all, thank you for the invite. Always glad to come back. So, as you mentioned, the challenge was till now we developed one software on-premise product which was on top of hardware, and we actually, as part of the strategy that we talked about in the last podcast, we decided to move to 4 different verticals or product lines. Meaning, the first one was the existing on-prem products, the second one was the SaaS platform, the third one was the mobile platform, which was with a connection to the second one, but was a dedicated, separate mobile platform, and the fourth one was actually doing all the functions at scale and multiplicity, trying to diagnose phones on big scales. So actually, we were asked to deliver in parallel 4 different product lines, and the challenge was do it with the same resources. So how do you approach this challenge? First of all, our existing organization was a functional expertise organization, meaning underneath the VP R&D, there were all these expertise functions in groups like front-end group and a back-end and a business logic, and in mobile, Android, iOS teams, testing QA. So each group had its own expertise. And actually, this is the classic R&D organizations that we saw over the past years, that you have one group with these expertise, and you have the PMO that actually, per project, is picking and choosing or collecting people that are part of the program or the project and is delivering. So the responsibility on the group managers is on the profession and on the code and the expertise, but the responsibility on the delivery was only on the PMO group or the project managers. So this was our existing organization structure, and we had issues of the delivery cadence, and we understood that if we are forced to move to 4 different product lines, we will need to change the game here and act differently. So the process was actually, we took all the engineering leaders in addition to product management. You need product management as part of this because this organization is part of the delivery and PMOs and system architects and all the leaders of the R&D organization, and in addition, product management. We started a process where we analyzed what we want to achieve. We defined the problem statement. We analyzed the principles and guidelines that we want to act upon. I will mention them in a minute. And then we went to 7 different companies, to R&D organization, to understand what's engineering methods and development in other organizations, because we're not the first organization that was forced to move to this different delivery cadence. So we wanted to understand from the experience of others and avoid inventing the wheel. This process, we got help from consultant agencies, and we did it very slowly. It's very important to do it the right way and not to come with a top-down approach. And we did it very slowly, very thoroughly, and we did this process in order to get the buy-in of all the engineering leaders. And we defined together four major guidelines or principles. First one is we want to deliver fast, but quality versus delivery, we want to maintain quality in parallel to the delivery timelines. So timeline won't affect the quality. This is the first principle. The second one was preventing bottlenecks or constraints simultaneously. So we want to decouple the constraints of these verticals. So we want each one to be autonomous and with the ability to deliver and without any dependencies from other groups. The third one was actually to build self-contained delivery groups that can end-to-end deliver everything and very connected to the principles number 2, decouple the constraints. And the fourth principle was referring to the profession and expertise. So usually when organizations or companies are moving so fast to this delivery cadence and actually changing dramatically the way they deliver and execute, it comes on behalf of expertise and technology depth. So the fourth principle was we should deliver and we should remain not only with the quality but with the technology depth, because we were a technology company with a very deep capabilities. We wanted to keep the aggressive execution in parallel to the deep IP that we had. With these four principles and guidelines, we went to a journey or a process with all the engineering managers going to all these companies and understanding how other companies mitigated or addressed this challenge.
So, Moshe, before we continue to describe the significant change that was done, can you elaborate a little bit on what you saw in those 7 companies? I mean, were they doing something, all of them the same, or there was a spectrum? What were the edges, etc.?
First of all, these companies were very different one from another because we wanted to have a variant of options to understand. And as I mentioned, we're not the first organization to meet this challenge. And eventually in the industry, you can see, imagine a scale. On the right hand, you can see organizations that are very focused, expertise or professional focused, which is the classic approach. And the other edge of the scale, you can see organizations that are very delivery oriented. We saw that it's a trade-off between profession and delivery. There are companies that the expertise/profession is so deep that delivery is so slow. And from the other side, there were companies where they went all the way to the delivery and they had all these Scrum teams. Each one has all the elements in it, but they worked in silos. So if, for example, Scrum team number 1, there was an Android developer, so he didn't talk with the same developer in Scrum team number 2. So we saw all the elements in all the companies, but eventually our decision was to move to an organization structure that can combine or meet the challenge or the trade-off between a profession and delivery. The decision that we made organize the structure in a way that it won't affect the delivery and it won't affect the deep profession as well in parallel.
So what was eventually the structure that we went for?
So we went to a structure of guilds and gangs. Imagine a matrix where the rows are guilds and columns are gangs or squads. One of the main companies that we got inspiration from was Spotify, where their verticals are called squads, but it's the same, gangs or squads. And the professional guilds, the rows or the horizontal elements in the matrix, are actually responsible of how and the architecture and code review and how to develop and all the elements that are around the expertise depth. From the other side, the gangs, the verticals, are responsible of the what to deliver, the content, together with the relevant PM, because PMs are very connected and relevant in this organization. So the gangs were responsible of what, when, timeline, and quality. So this definition of responsibility, or R&Rs, gave us the ability to address the trade-off of professional slash expertise and delivery. So after we explained what is guilds and what is the responsibility of the gangs, you can see that each gang leader has actually a toolbox of all the elements in the organization to be self-contained and to deliver end-to-end. In addition to that, by the way, this gang leader is a R&D director. It's not product management. I will talk about product management later on in this organization, but this gang is the execution group for the PM, the product management, which is defining the what and the requirements from the customers. So this gang is delivering it in parallel. So no constraints. If you have a DevOps issue, you have a DevOps engineer allocated in your organization as a gang leader, and you should execute very fast. Each one was an R&D director, was actually like a mini VP R&D. So I took my main challenge and break it to 4 sub-deliveries, and each one of these directors was actually responsible of the delivery. In addition to that, we saw in big organizations that took this approach that because of the delivery, which is the business and the heart of the organization, the guilds, the professional guilds, are weaker because of the business, and the rhythm of the organization is in the gangs. So what we did here, we defined that each R&D director will have 2 hats. The first one is a gang delivery, and the second one is the guild delivery. So actually you have a matrix of 4 by 4. Each R&D director has a professional responsibility or expertise responsibility, but he has delivery expertise as well. And the team, the staff of R&D was the gangs of gangs. So these 4 people, each one need to deliver or to allocate resources from his guild and to get resources to his gang from other guilds. So they were working in a very good vibe and synergy. And if you plan in the beginning the resource allocation of this organization, which should not move on daily basis, but maybe on monthly basis, and only when you have a crisis in one of the gangs, then this structure can create a very oiled machine which is executing in very short time, and this was actually what happened. So it's very related to the structure and to the definition of these R&D directors in order to succeed. In addition to that, the PMO group was more customer facing and more organizational process wise, and they took the responsibility from delivery to the customer, all the release process, working with R&D gangs, product management, sales, marketing, and eventually the customers. And they actually bridge the gaps that eventually most of the organization has with the execution elements which are not R&D, because the organizations are very R&D engineering focused.
Maybe a couple of clarifications. So the delivery units actually were the gangs.
Yes.
And in the gangs, there were now a mixture of R&D people, different expertise,
Yes.
QA, product,
DevOps, any front end, back end, business logic, any expertise was allocated on demand as we need for that gang. We had about 15 to 20 people in a gang, which are multiple functions or expertise.
Right. And the guilds was providing the professional capabilities to all the gangs.
Yeah.
And I know that one of the issues that you were trying to resolve with this structure is that if there was a certain software developed for a certain product, actually to ensure that the same code can be used in different product.
Yeah.
And by the fact that the guilds were the same people or the same R&D directors, they could have managed this and ensure that this is going to occur.
This is a good question. It's emphasizing the process that we did in order to avoid moving all the way to only delivery on behalf of the expertise. If you have Scrum teams that are isolated, then Android developer from Scrum number 1 won't talk with Android developer from Scrum team number 2. So our structure actually enabled code reuse and knowledge reuse. And in our structure, the same Android developer actually developed a library which was reused by gang number two.
And if people are thinking, how can you increase by more than, I think it was twice or three times the output development while maintaining the same number of people, reuse of software was one of the main reasons.
Yeah, don't invent the wheel, don't work in silos. Try to be as much as synergy that you can and be very open about what's happening out of your boundaries. This is a culture or atmosphere that we created, and you need a very open conversation in your R&D staff in order to achieve that. But once everyone understands that we need to develop and deliver and execute as fast as we can, but we can do it if these people from the guild, the same guild, are working together, then this can be achievable.
I think the other important element, the fact that in the same guild you had an R&D director and a product director working hand by hand, had the advantage of that they could react in almost real time. There are always scenarios where you have a rethink about the product and something that was not defined well and you need to define it, and they could work together, and that saves also a lot of valuable time.
Yes, correct. The PM and the PD were actually a power couple. The PM, the product management, was outbound towards customers. He was actually bringing into the gang everything. All the gang members, which are developers and testing engineers and DevOps and all the functions, were very open because of that to what's happening in the customer. So everyone was connected, everyone was accountable, and this power couple actually, if you need to choose, it's all about assignment, but once you're choosing the right people, this power couple actually, the sky is the limit.
So can you provide some information about, let's say, the main difficulty that you encounter while doing this major change within the organization?
The main difficulty in these changes are specifically around the human nature or human beings, which are not willing so fast to move out of their comfort zone, and they have their area of territory that they are used to for years, and now you're coming with your new idea and structure and actually moving the mouse cheese, and it's a difficult challenge for people. Having said that, the way to address this human nature is by actually creating a process where everyone buys in advance. You need to engage all the engineering leaders and actually all the organization. So when you have the buy-in, and it's not a top-down approach, but a bottom-up where everyone understands the needs of current strategy of the company and they are a part of the process, then you can eliminate the problems that you can see on the way.
We had an organization with probably 80, 90 people in R&D and QA. The question is, can a smaller company, 20, 30, 40 people in R&D and QA, can also adopt such a structure, or is it limited to larger number of employees?
It's a very good question. I think we had the ultimate size of an organization where we can control this structure. We had about 90 engineers, testing engineers in the engineering organization, and this is something that is controllable. Less than that, it's an option as well. It depends on the relevancy of the company. So there are companies that this structure is not relevant. It's very related to the level of functions that you have. For example, in a company that you have only full stack developers and the integration or the variant of the different expertise is not so high, maybe this structure is not the right way to go. So it's more about the variant of the expertise versus the size and the numbers of the organization. The answer eventually, bottom line, is yes, it can be less than that, but related to the situation. I can say that we saw the same structure in very big companies where you had not dozens of engineers but hundreds, and that structure in these companies was less controllable. They didn't structure themselves as we did, but it's again related to the type of product that you're trying to deliver.
Very interesting. So basically, we done a sort of a shift from a very professional type organization to a more delivery organization while working to ensure that technology depth and IP are still a key element in our deliveries.
Yes, this can summarize the entire change that we did. We were able to maintain the trade off which is existing in the entire industry for years, meaning the trade off between expertise, profession versus delivery. And we were able to maintain this challenge and this trade off in a way which we not only delivered on time, we were able to maintain our IP and our technical depth.
I think that's a great point to end this session. Thank you, Moshe, for this interesting topic and looking forward for our next podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invite.